However, the Labour Party has accused INEC of not allowing Obi's lawyers access to the materials despite the court ruling. Peter Obi spoke right here on the morning show, stating that despite court orders, INEC has refused to grant him access to the election materials and that INEC, as a public institution, should be open to allow him challenge the process at which they arrived at declaring the winner of the election.
I'm only asking, can I have access to the documents and materials you used to arrive at that? I'm not asking you to change what you said. And remember, like I also say, people, I'm not challenging their declaration. Sorry, I'm not challenging who they declared. I'm not challenging whatever the outcome. I'm challenging the process which they arrived at their declaration. And unless we do that, we're not going to stop the rascality we witnessed in that election.
Well, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, during the meeting with the lawyers of the Labour Party, said that the commission has nothing to hide, assuring that they would make available any document the party requests.
The meeting has been scheduled with all the resident electoral commissioners. Is going to be a virtual meeting at 3 p.m. today, at which we'll discuss, among other issues, this matter of providing CTCs not only to the Labour Party, but to all other litigants as well. I want to assure you that the Commission will not hide any document from anybody and will make any document that they have requested.
Well, Dr. Abati, your interview yesterday caused a lot of furore on social media, whether or not, Peter Obi was stating the fact that he was only challenging the process and not the declaration. But I believe also the outrage is the fact that even after that meeting with the lawyers, the chairman and INEC still refused to grant them access to those documents that they require.
Well, I don't see what the splitting is all about. It's a basic principle in law that nothing can stand on nothing. If a candidate in an election says, I'm questioning the process, he's questioning the entire thing. Yep. Because if you question the process, it means whatever that process produces, if you win in the court of law, then that product of that process cannot stand. The way I understood what Mr. Obi was saying was that it's not a personal thing. And that was why he kept referring to Asiwaju as his elder brother. It's not a personal thing, but specific to the presidential election. He believes, he's convinced that the process that produced Asiwaju is flawed. And he has taken the step of going to court, a properly constituted court of law, tribunal in this particular case, Court of Appeal acting as the tribunal, to challenge that process. So I don't see why people are saying, oh, he's challenging the process. He's not challenging the outcome. Nothing in law stands on nothing.
Absolutely.
Ex nihilo. Anyway, let's leave that. Now, the second thing is that he showed his commitment to his position yesterday by sending to INEC 60 lawyers, led by Levi Uzoku SAN, that went to INEC to say, look, INEC, the court has ruled that you must allow us access to election materials. You must allow us access to data base and certified true copies of the information on the database. We have just 21 days. 10 days have already disappeared. You are preparing for elections. You have to obey the court of law. And as I said earlier on this program, INEC is not in a position to cherry pick. You don't decide on your own which order of court you will obey or not. It's a constitutional matter. Section 287 says that what the court says is what you must obey. Otherwise, you are contemptuous. And I'm glad that Mr. Peter Obi said yesterday that apart from the street protest that is being planned by his party, the party will also approach the court to charge, to seek the leave of court, to charge INEC for contempt. The whole point is about the rule of law. And INEC has consistently failed to keep its own promises. after the court ruled on March 3, INEC came out later and said whatever the court says is what INEC will do, and that INEC is committed to the rule of law. The same INEC must not be seen to be disobeying the court of law or violating Section 287 of the Constitution. That is the principle.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, INEC, as a public institution, may well end up putting itself at risk of being described, dismissed, labeled as a lawless institution.
Ayo, like I was saying to you, the issue was that tweet that, the interview you guys had. Peter Obi also put out a tweet to clarify that statement. But I'll get you a reaction from some people. This is from Jonathan, who wrote, "Is the electoral process that led to the declaration of Tinubu as winner different from the one that got a Labour Party candidate of the FCT senatorial district a seat? Isn't the electoral process for the presidential and senatorial and the House of Representatives one and the same?" So that question also came up, where people were saying, how is it that you are, praising the process that got in, your candidate from the FCT, and then you are questioning the presidential results? But that really is the question. Yeah. It is the presidential election that Peter Obi is questioning. Because as you recall, we had those videos of people saying that they are not uploading the presidential results, so they are only updating the National Assembly results.
Yes, and he actually responded to that question yesterday. So for those who are asking, I think it would be good to rewatch it on the Arise TV page on YouTube, because he responded to it very clearly. He said that for the National Assembly, that's House of Reps and Senate, they had no issues uploading to IREV. So they don't have an issue with that. However, the question is, if it was easy or it was smooth to upload to IREV, for National Assembly elections, what's happened with the presidential elections? And that's what they're challenging in court. So I hope that puts pay to people saying, if you could accept those who won the 40 seats you won in a National Assembly to the presidential, hope that puts pay to that. So now going to the story around INEC. Oji, one of the things we've talked about is the lack of integrity of this institution. And it seems as if, rather than trying to prove themselves as being a credible organization that people can trust, they are doing exactly the opposite of that. We've already looked at the legal angle or the legal implication of the ruling. The question then is, what is INEC hiding? It's contrary to what the chairman of INEC is saying, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, in that statement, saying that, he said they have nothing to hide. If there's nothing to hide, what is the big issue around obeying the court order? And earlier we talked about the fact that they've obeyed the court order of reconfiguring the BVAS, such that they postponed the elections by 1 week. That's the governorship and State House of Assembly. So why can't they give Labour Party and the other parties in the suit, so the PDP and APC, access to these documents? So when they stall, it puts a question mark on the credibility of INEC and the processes of INEC. If indeed he has said, except Professor Yakubu is coming out to tell us that there's a reason why they cannot. Even in that, you need to seek a court order to vary that order in terms of the reason why they do not want to, allow their lawyers to inspect the materials. I think it's unacceptable, and INEC ought to do better by the Nigerian people.
Absolutely, and that's the outrage there. You saw that video I played, Rufai, where he said that he assures us that assured the Labour Party that they will provide the document. What was stopping that process from happening? You can see some of the tweets, even from Ajo, if we can pull that up, who is saying that Professor Mahmood Yakubu is about to cause a big disaster in the country by purposely denying Peter Obi's legal team access to BVAS and other documentary evidence from INEC as backup to their claim of irregularity surrounding the presidential election, to be topped with a 21-day deadline.
Oji, maybe because I live in Nigeria, when people say, I assure you, I get scared, because I don't believe it's a prelude to non-assurance for anything. In fact, when people say, I assure you in the public space, Davido's assurance to Chioma is more tenable than their own assurance. Because too many times we've heard, I assure you, nothing is happening. The INEC chief is not supposed to be assuring anybody of anything. He's supposed to follow the law to the letter. But the truth is, In a country where you don't have rule of law, you have rule of lawyers. In 2012, the BBC has something called, it calls the Reith Lectures. As regard, it's done in memorial for John Reith, one of the first leaders of the BBC then. And Professor Neil Ferguson gave a lecture then in the Reith Lectures, and he called it Rule of Law and Its Enemies. In Nigeria, the sad reality is that the institutions of government have become the enemies of rule of law. This same
Ferguson? I have the book.
Neil Ferguson.
I have the book that came out of it.
You get the institutions.
Another person.
The institutions in Nigeria have become the enemies of rule of law. And you see, when that happens, what happens? It now becomes a rule of lawyers. So it's no longer the rule of law. So it's now a case of the lawyers that can get the system to favor the clients more. That's what happens, and that's what's happening here. And that's why you see that because the institutions have become the enemies of rule of law, INEC can decide to pick and choose. When the court gave an order, it was quick to use his own lawyers to go vary the order to get his own judgments. So he did pick and choose the one that favored him, but the others, he will not do it. And you see a society where the institutions become the enemies of the rule of law is a society that starts to sink steadily. And that's why Nigeria is where it is today. So we know what is happening. We know the games that are being played. If INEC claims there's nothing to hide, how are we going to believe them? If there was nothing to hide, you should be able to be quick to surrender everything to be inspected in the first place. It is obvious that there is definitely something to hide that we don't know about. And that is what is happening here. So we know. But because when people are talking and analyzing about where the rate started to beat us in Nigeria, they should not forget that when the institutions set up by the state to be able to uphold and listen to the rule of law are the ones violating the rule of law, they become the enemy of the rule of law, then you know that the country is headed south. And that's what is happening in Nigeria. So I'm happy 60 lawyers have gone there. INEC should still keep on playing the game of Teddy Picker is playing by buying time, because you know there's a statutory 21 days regulation. Probably they will be able to give what they choose to give and not what can be inspected. And let's see how this process pans out. But they should remember. And that's why we also call on the judiciary. Nigerians are watching. And the future and the furtherance of democracy will be dependent on the decisions taken. By not upholding the rule of law, we are dancing and we are playing with the fire.